Today my video is all about gardening terms. Welcome to K&D's Homestead. I'm Donna. It took me many years to be able to wrap my brain around what some of the terms meant. So I hope that this will be helpful, and I hope by the end of this video you'll have a better understanding, if you're a beginner gardener, of what some of the terms are and how you can remedy some situations. Annuals are plants that you generally have to buy each year and replace if you like the same plants in your garden. And I'm talking mostly flowers in this case, but if you like the same type of flowers and they're annuals, most people have to buy them year after year because they have a 1-year life cycle generally. Sometimes an annual can act as a perennial and that plant will come back, but most of the time an annual reseeds itself and then the new one pops up the next year, making some people believe that that plant is a perennial and that it is regrowing, but really it reseeded itself and it's growing a new plant from the seeds that it dropped the previous year. But the conditions have to be right. But as a general rule of thumb, an annual has a 1-year life cycle and will do its thing. It will flower, produce, and then die off, and then it doesn't come back. Biennial plants take 2 years to complete their life cycle. They will generally not produce seeds until the 2nd year, and some examples are parsley and carrots. Now, parsley can be carried over beyond its 2-year life expectancy if the conditions are right or perfect. It will grow a good bit longer. And an example, I have a parsley back here. This parsley is 3 years old in the basket in the greenhouse. I don't expect it has a lot of life left in it. I actually need to harvest it. See how it's limping over, not because it needs anything, but because it is so heavy, it's limping. I need to harvest it. But this plant is 3 years old, and it's only stayed in good condition because of the conditions in the greenhouse. But that is a biennial. It takes 2 years for the life cycle of the plant, and most of the time on the 2nd year they will seed and then that plant will die. We all know what perennials are. We all want perennials in our garden as much as possible. I put more perennials in my garden than I do anything else. But perennials, that same plant will reproduce, it'll rejuvenate itself and reproduce year after year after year. It will come back. Sometimes they don't even die out. I have a rosemary plant will stay green all year long, and it's never died, and that plant is probably 5 or 6 years old. But most perennials will come back year after year, and that's why we love them. We plant it once. As long as we take care of it, it'll keep coming back. Everyone has probably heard the term determinant. That is normally associated with tomato plants, and determinant plants are generally a hybrid and generally a bush. But what that means is they have a predetermined amount of fruit, in the case that I'm talking about tomatoes, that it will produce. That doesn't mean it won't produce more, but the bulk of the fruit all comes on and is ready at the same time within a few weeks of each other. And then after that, the plant may survive the rest of the summer and just put out a here and there tomato or just a couple of tomatoes, but it won't produce heavily like it did in the first round of production. Whereas indeterminate means From the time it starts producing, and I'm talking tomatoes again, it will produce all summer long right up to the first frost. They are usually the vine type where they grow up really tall and you have to trellis them, and they are normally an heirloom tomato. A hybrid is a plant that is created from taking two plants of two different types or varieties and crossbreeding them to make a brand new variety. You can collect seeds from hybrids and try to germinate them. Most people don't bother, but germination from hybrid seeds has a lower germination rate and it's not always successful. But when you germinate successfully seeds from hybrids, you are not going to get the same exact plant as the parent plant that the seeds came from. They're going to be similar with different characteristics. If it produces fruit, it's not even likely going to be the same flavor. It's going to be a cross between the two parents that plant originally came from. Hybrids are not normally GMO. Until recently, we could say they're not GMO at all. But recently, they have managed. Oh, mercy. Little wren came into the greenhouse. It's going to flutter around. We'll have to find a way to get it out. They have managed recently to cross a tomato with snapdragon, and that helped to create a true purple tomato. That is considered a GMO hybrid, but I'm not aware of any others that are GMOs. Hybrids are not normally GMOs. They have just been crossbred from two different varieties of whatever. And there's a lot of controversy surrounding the creation of that particular hybrid with the GMO seeds. Heirlooms are seeds or plants that have been stabilized over centuries, meaning the same plant has been around for centuries. That seed has become stabilized, and if you germinate seeds, you save them and germinate them the following year, you should get the same exact plant and fruit as the parent plant that the seeds came from. Heirloom seeds are not GMO. Harden off. When you have your new seedlings that are growing and they are almost ready to go outside into the garden, you'll want to harden them off. And what that means is you're going to take those seedlings that are ready to be planted outside, you're going to take them outside for a few hours a day for maybe a week, and you're going to let them get acclimated to the weather. You don't want to leave them out there for long periods of time. You just kind of putting them in and out for a while, and let them get used to the conditions that they're going to be in. And the wind is another factor. It helps to strengthen those stems and the roots, and then after about a week you can set them out and they should be okay. But if you take a plant that has been in a protected environment, whether it's in your house or in your greenhouse, and then just suddenly set it outside in the garden, it's going to be a bit of a shock. It's not used to the wind blowing it and moving it side to side. It's not used to all that heat and the sun beaming down on it. So you just need to harden them off, getting them used to in baby steps to being outside. Damping off. A plant that has dampened off, it usually takes place when you have those young seedlings that you are nurturing indoors, wherever that may be, and they're fine one day and then suddenly the next day they have flopped over and they look like they are disintegrating. That's damping off. That is due to pathogens in the soil that is attacking the entire plant, and they will usually die. It's best to pull them out. You want to keep your seedlings moist, but not setting in soppy wet water. To deadhead means you are going to pinch, snip, or cut the dead spent flowers off of your plant. Now in most cases we're talking about flowers, not your vegetables. But deadheading serves two purposes. One, It makes that plant more attractive, of course, to have all those dead spent flowers gone and off of the plant. It also stimulates new growth. If you don't deadhead and you just let those dead spent flowers stay on that plant, eventually that plant is going to start to believe that its time is done, the work is over, and it's time to go to seed and not produce any more flowers. Deadheading is important for the health of the plant and for the beauty of the plant. Mulch serves three important purposes, if not more. The first purpose, mulch actually helps to retain the moisture in the soil and is a prevention against fast evaporation of the moisture in your soil. It helps to tamp down and keep weeds at bay, although weeds will grow through mulch most of the time, but it does keep them at bay. And it also serves to keep the soil cooler for the root system. Any material can be used as mulch that is safe to be around your plants. And this is wood chips, wood shavings, as long as there's no chemical in the wood or paint or things like that. But shavings, hay, straw, decaying grasses, if they're not completely decayed, then that is considered a mulch. But anything you can use as a bedding around your plants is a mulch. Now, there's a difference between mulch and compost. Compost used to be mulch, that is, those same materials that just decomposed into a completely broke down manner, and it becomes compost, which looks and serves like soil. However, it is full of beneficial nutrients once it has broken down. But compost can be made at home, compost can be bought, and compost is any organic matter that has been fully broken down, including the wood chips and the dead leaf debris and straws and hays. Once that breaks down and becomes compost. Compost also, at home composting as well as some store-bought compost, consist of some manures. Manures are high in nutrients once broken down properly, and that is chicken manure, cow manure, goat manure, rabbit manure, not your domestic animals like dogs and cats. And some manures are cold and some are hot. The hot ones, they're not ready. They will burn your plants. Hot manure is turkey manure, chicken manure, and many others. Cold manure is goat manure and rabbit manure. A lot of people love to use rabbit manure, and the cold manures can go straight from, the bottom of the animal straight into the garden and mixed into the soil. It can also go in your compost pile to further add to your compost. When composting at home, you would save, if you have chickens or poultry, you would save that manure, and that needs to cook over a period of 3 to 6 months. Some people even, go a whole year and let it fully break down along with the bedding or the hay that manure is in. To make your own, you would just start a pile of your grass clippings, leaves you've raked up. You need some brown material, which would be, you can use cardboard, shred that up and put in it. You can use vegetable scraps from your garden or your kitchen. One thing you don't want to use is meat and fats. There are some other food items you don't want to put in your compost pile, but those two are definitely no-nos. But you can make compost yourself, and compost, once you put it in your garden, on your vegetables or in your flower beds, it is high in valuable nutrients, and the plants will love them and thrive because of the compost that you have mixed into your soil. Organic fertilizer versus synthetic fertilizer. Organic fertilizer is natural, not man-made. Organic fertilizer, however, is not available immediately to the plants. An organic fertilizer is a slow release fertilizer, and it can take 4 to 6 months for organic fertilizer to break down. It really has to break down in the soil, and the breakdown happens because of the microbes in the soil. They break it down for you, and over time it becomes available to the plants, but not immediately. Bone meal and blood meal are considered organic fertilizer, but they have to break down as well. They are generally not water soluble. I have seen, though I've not used it, that there is, it's hard to find, but there is a water soluble bone meal and blood meal that you can mix with water. Any liquid fertilizer is available immediately to the plants. Otherwise, the organic fertilizer does have to break down before it is available. Since it is considered slow release, you want other things in and around your plants that's going to feed your plants those nutrients while you're waiting on the organic fertilizer to break down. Synthetic fertilizer is a man-made product, and that breaks down a lot quicker than the organic fertilizer. And normally during the growing season, you'll want to add, if you use it, synthetic fertilizer every 3 to 4 weeks lightly to your plants, because it does break down much faster, and so you have to reapply it. Here's a biggie. And if you research, you will find so many different answers. Nobody comes together and believes the same thing. I'm about to share with you my belief about blossom end rot. It's kind of controversial. You'll see a lot of people online who, oh, that's blossom end rot, you need to add calcium. Well, let me start at the beginning. Blossom end rot is a condition that results from overwatering or underwatering. If you're overwatering, and I know it's accidental, it's because you love your plants so much, you overlove them. You don't want them to dry out, so you kind of end up, I'm guilty of it, I've done it. You overwater. Those roots become so saturated they can't uptake the calcium properly that is in the soil. It is a lack of calcium, but it's normally not a lack of calcium in the soil. So you don't need necessarily to add calcium. It's that too much water, it can't uptake the calcium because it's all kind of diluted and flooding out. It can also happen from underwatering. Plants receive everything that they need through the watering. They cannot absorb nutrients alone. Nutrients come up the roots when it takes up the water. If there's no water, it can't bring up the nutrients, therefore it can't uptake the calcium, and it becomes calcium deficient. Calcium deficient when you're overwatering as well, and the end result is the bottom part of the fruit, mostly tomatoes and peppers, will rot, blossom end rot. The way to best remedy that situation is change your watering methods. Water enough, don't let the plant dry out, or back off a little bit from your watering that you're already doing, and don't water quite as much. It's a problem, especially when you're using containers for gardening, because you just have those little holes and the water does not go out fast enough. Now in raised beds where there's no bottom, the water will go out. In ground, sometimes it can happen in ground if you don't have really good drainage. The key is good drainage and not overwatering. If you have blossom end rot, you just simply, that tomato is a dud. some people say you can cut that bottom off and still use it. I personally am not going to do it. I'm going to throw that tomato away. I'm going to snip off any tomatoes that I find that have that blossom end rot, although it doesn't happen much anymore once I learned the correct way to not cause it in the first place. But if I had it, I'm just going to snip that off. I'm going to sacrifice those tomatoes. Those are sacrificial tomatoes, and I'm going to wait for new tomatoes to, a lot of traffic going by here. And I'm just going to wait for a new round of tomatoes, which will appear. But the best thing is get rid of the bad tomatoes and change the watering method. Now here's the controversy. A lot of people say add Epsom salt around the base of your plant, because everybody does believe, they agree on it being a calcium deficiency. But that's where things change. It's not that the calcium is not there, it's that it can't uptake it. But when you add Epsom salt to the base of that plant, first of all, Epsom salt is not calcium, it's magnesium. So you're not adding calcium. What you are doing is you're adding salt. Salt will burn your plants, because people generally just willy-nilly sprinkle it around. It's not even a measured amount, and that salt is going to go down to those roots. It's going to burn the plant. It's not helpful doing that. The best method is change your watering method. Add water or don't add so much water. Now what you can do that does sometimes help is create a foliar spray using Epsom salt. Remember, I just said Epsom is magnesium. Magnesium helps uptake calcium. So there's a fine line. When you add it in the soil, it is not going to help it, it could hurt it. But when you add it as a foliar spray, it can help those roots uptake the calcium that is in the soil. Now you want it diluted. You don't want to spray a heavy, salty Epsom salt solution onto your leaves. But what you can do, this is also not across the globe agreement on measurements. If I am going to make a foliar spray, I am only going to use 1 tablespoon per gallon of water. Many other people say several tablespoons. It's up and down, it's across the board. I'm telling you what I do. I don't know if it'll work for you, but it's something you can play with on, let's say, a plant that it's not going to hurt you if you overdo it. Or you can just, trial and error. See, that's what gardening is trial and error, and that's how you learn. You make mistakes, you do things wrong, or you don't do enough correctly. But back to my point. I'm going to make that foliar spray 1 tablespoon per gallon of water in a spray bottle, and a couple of times a week while I'm waiting on that plant to recover, I'm going to add that foliar spray of magnesium and water to the leaves. The leaves will take in that magnesium, and it might help uptake the calcium. I'm just saying. It's what I do. It has worked for me in the past. But I do say proceed with caution. Y'all look at this impatient plant. It's 3 years old. It's been in my greenhouse all 3 years, but it got so big I had to bring it out, get it out of there because of space. This thing is massive.